This episode is brought to you by Self-Care for Diabetes, a virtual online program that's doing diabetes care differently.
We don't tell you to lose weight. Instead, we help you create positive and meaningful changes that make your life with diabetes better than before. Visit selfcareforddiabetes.com to learn more.
Welcome to Body Kindness.
This is our special series on self-care for diabetes concerns.
I'm Rebecca Scritchfield.
And I'm Glennis Oyston.
Let's bust some diabetes myths and spiral up together. Hey, Glennis, what's up?
Hey, Rebecca, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm really excited to, have these episodes on self-care for diabetes and share what we've been learning and working with our groups these past couple years and offer some insight that will hopefully help others who have diabetes concerns.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the subject today.
So we're going to talk about shame, more importantly, shame resilience. And it's one of those things that, we often don't say the word shame. We don't know what it is, or we don't know how to name it. But why do you think it's important that we hold some space and talk about shame?
Yeah, I think it's so important to talk about this because it is such a real thing, especially when health concerns are coming into play. I think I don't have any clients that haven't brought some sort of shame into our work. I know that we in our diabetes groups have talked with people that are really struggling with shame around, like, I have diabetes, I have failed at weight loss, and they're just really struggling to see that what they're in fact suffering from is shame and how it's really helping them from healing.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the key points that I wanted to make sure that listeners really understand. I often have clients that will say, I feel so much guilt, about fill in the blank, right? Thing that they did not do right. But it's not always a focus on the thing, right? When you get talking and you dig a little bit deeper, they're feeling a more intense negative emotion, an emotion that is saying, like, I am bad, not, ooh, I'm making some mistakes and I want to make changes, right? That would be guilt. But when somebody is feeling a more intense negative emotion where it's like, it's a challenge to your worthiness. It's like, I'm a bad person for having diabetes. I'm a bad person, because my A1Cs are climbing. I'm a bad person, because, I did all these wrong things and I'm individually responsible and I am to blame. I'm bad for getting diabetes, right? And even like when, they're signed up for the program and they're feeling shame because it's like, I'm bad because I haven't figured out how to take care of myself. And it's almost like this mirror, and it's like, I am the problem. And that is when you're in shame.
Right. And it's when you blame yourself as the problem. There's just all this emotional distress and this hopelessness. I mean, because if you're seeing yourself as a bad person, we don't take care of things we hate, right? We take care of things that we love. So I think that's why it becomes so much less likely that we can take positive steps forward, and then you just kind of feel stuck. And this is coming up all the time with clients in our group, and we just want to offer some really practical strategies for dealing with the shame.
Yeah, I'm really excited that we can share some insight for folks. And I wondered, Glennis, if you could start us in conversation about maybe like talking a little bit more about what's normal, and when to worry about it, like when we should, take action to deal with the shame directly.
Right. So there's this great article from Scientific American. We'll put it in the show notes. It's from a couple of years ago, that sort of talks about the underpinnings, of the impacts of shame. And, just from that article, differentiating between guilt and shame, I think, was really helpful, because a lot of people would say, like, I feel guilty about something, when in fact what they're feeling is shame. So shame happens when we violate some sort of societal norm that we really believe in. So this is some norm that we feel it's desirable and binding in some way. So when I think of my clients and they start to come and work with me and also in our group, I think those societal norms that they feel like they've violated are I have to be healthy and I have to be in a certain body size to be healthy or to be acceptable. Guilt, on the other hand, happens when we've performed this concrete action for which we're sort of accepting responsibility. So shame, if you've done something wrong with guilt, you're sort of, oh, I did something wrong, and in a way you can make amends. Shame makes us direct our focus inward and view our entire self in a negative light, whereas guilt sort of causes us to focus our attention on the feelings of other people. And I think when you're focusing on other people, you can make amends. You can work through that. I think there, and the other person can sort of acknowledge that. And when we're in shame, it's just we're in conflict with ourselves. And I think that is the big sort of problem around shame, is that there's no one there to say, it's okay. It's okay. You're not in a place at that moment to say, it's okay. This is not a grave injustice that's happened. This is something we can work past.
Right. Yeah. It's really interesting because, when we are helping people, make positive changes, and they'll have some desires or some goals, and it could be, say it's a movement goal, and, the first idea has a lot of shoulding on it, right? Like, and they can be pretty big ideas, almost like too big of a jump from where they are currently. So, if they're getting very little movement and they're interested in approaching movement, likely it's come from somebody says you need to move or else. And it could be reading guidelines or just thinking about what they imagine movement to be. Not fully kind of understanding and embracing that it could have been that 5 days a week, walking 30 to 60 minutes. And some don't even give a range like that, right? And it's just, it actually could feel better to start with something that is almost like a smaller goal, with like a range. And so, for an initial, say, week, I would like to, walk for about 10 minutes. And then the next day I'd like to try some chair yoga. And so there's kind of like flexibility in thinking about your goals, right? And so say you set a goal like that and say you didn't do any of it, right? Shame would be like, you suck. You did all this planning. You didn't do anything. And it's often our inner critic in our mind is saying that, right? And then it's like guilt. It's like, I'm real disappointed. I was interested in it, and like life happened, and in that moment, I just chose to do the other thing, or I didn't feel like I had a choice because work was calling me or family was calling me. And gosh, this is really hard, right? And to your point, hey, that's okay. We can try again. And so that, it's almost like this in like your inner mind, right? You have your inner critic that is shaming you. And we need to have this inner caregiver that's much more flexible and compassionate and will work with you toward these positive changes. I think that's a key difference when it comes to how would somebody shift from shame to guilt if you're working on a positive, you're trying to work on making a positive change in your life that you're really interested in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about shame that some of our participants have experienced. And a lot comes up with respect to shame at a doctor or dentist office around weight concerns. And we're going to have a separate episode where we talk about weight concerns because it's a big issue, especially around diabetes. But yeah, I just wanted to hear a little bit from you just about what you remember about some of our participants saying about how doctors and dentists have kind of body bashed them or anything.
Yeah, it's with every group, our live group chats that we have, which are fantastic. Every time I think it comes up, and it's always by a different person, but it is often the same issue. Like, I've gone to the doctor and I really have concerns. I really want to, help to work on my blood sugars. I really want to help, improve my health. And it comes down to the doctor brings up, well, you have to lose weight. And these are people who have tried this many, many, many times usually. Mm-hmm. And so but it's going back to that societal norm, right? That is being violated for that person, and they go into the shame spiral. This is happening at dentist's office, doctor's offices, really all sorts of different, care providers. So, unfortunately, this is a bit of an epidemic of shame spreading. But what we sort of go back to is remembering that they need to change, not you. That I think of, weight as an outcome, not a behavior. Well, and it is an outcome and not a behavior. And sort of, pivoting to, well, what's the behavior that I want to work on versus what is the outcome of weight? In that moment, though, when you're at the doctor's, you're in this really vulnerable place. And, the shame spiral becomes real, and it can lead to that sort of downward spiral of anxiety and depression. It's very scary in that moment for people.
Let's take a quick pause for a message from our sponsor, selfcareforddiabetes.com.
If you're still thinking that you need to diet or make yourself lose weight in order to live well with diabetes, we want you to see things differently. Get started with our free download, 7 Myths About Diabetes and Weight. Available now at selfcareforddiabetes.com/myths. That's selfcare, 4, diabetes.com/myths.
Welcome back to our episode. And I wanted to share a story from one of our program participants who sent us an email after completing the 3-month membership. It really just meant a lot to me when I read it. And this participant emailed and said, I want to thank you for the module on shame resilience and for helping me work through shame in our live groups. I realized that my shame was fueling depression and anxiety. And before working with you, I felt like nothing was good enough. And I felt hopeless that I could make positive changes, that I could live well with diabetes. And now I feel like I have my life back. I can set boundaries with the doctor and family. I enjoy foods I love to eat. And most importantly, I'm very flexible with myself. I don't expect perfection anymore. I don't have to constantly be a problem to fix.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, I think it really spoke to me with respect to this idea of being a problem to fix, right? And that if you're walking around, right, with this big dark cloud over you and the voice in your mind, right, what you hear most prevalent is you are a problem, you are a problem. It's very hard to feel good and motivated or just worthy of taking the first step and the next step. I just find so often that it's almost like it's a surprise. It's our very first module. It's almost like a surprise to them how much not really having the tools to notice shame, to name it, and to relate to shame with kindness was getting in their way of taking, the first positive step.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we put it the very first module in our program, right? Because
it's like the README file and read me.
Yeah, it's like, please start here. I think people don't realize how much shame they're suffering from. And how it's really, people say, I don't know why I can't do this. And it's like, well, let's see how you feel about things. Oh, shame. Shame is sitting there saying, you can't do it. You're not good enough. Right. And so I love that first module where we're really talking about shame and giving guidance on how to reduce shame.
Yeah. And, we work a lot with folks too on the idea of just the way our brains work. Like we can tend to compare and despair, right? So if you make the mistake of Googling like diabetes, what to do about diabetes, it's going to be a major trap. so much that we had to have a separate module about myths, and how to work through them and setting boundaries in relationships, right? Because even if one's intention is to be helpful, whether it's a blogger or, you never know who's a spokesperson, who's trying to sell something, but ultimately it can be built on, there's a weight focus, and it's like, look at how amazing my life is. And the weight is what is held up as the gold star of, the weight loss was the reason why now I have all these things. And, it can feel like, really emotionally overwhelming because you're comparing to what your doctor is saying or what you're Googling or what other people are trying to be helpful, giving you advice. And I call it compare and despair. It's like, oh, I'm never going to get that. And so why bother? Right. And it's so important that we, what we try to do when folks come in is help people pivot to focus on their behavior. And like you said, it's okay, basic form of self-compassion, but then to focus on their behavior. And I was wondering if you could give just a quick few examples or even one example of how someone might do that pivot to focus on their behavior.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the folks that are feeling just generally bad with the way they eat. Right. Mm-hmm. And they feel like, and I think because diet culture sets people up to fail constantly, with incredible rules and that most people can't follow for very long. And so we have people coming in saying like, I've tried every diet, I've tried every, and the whole point of the diet was also to lose weight. And so, like I said before, that's sort of an outcome. Right. And, pivoting to focus on the behavior, which is, hey, there's a bunch of little things like you were talking about exercise before. What's a little goal here? What's something small that we can do? Okay, what really needs to happen? Well, I have a hard time getting 3 meals a day. Sometimes I skip breakfast and then I really push a long time and then I end up having a big meal later. Hey, why don't we make a goal of, we know that having more meals through the day is actually really helpful why don't we just make a small goal to have breakfast? Right. Or maybe it's, I really struggle with balance around my meals. Hey, what about a small goal to add in some vegetables to a meal? And that's something that you can focus on doing. That's the action, right? I feel bad that I didn't shop and prep this week ahead making those small goals. Okay, I'm really going to try to, take this time to sort of do a little prep first, make sure I get my shop in, those kinds of actions. And I think those are the things that can help people get unstuck a little bit.
Right. Right. And we have several modules on food and relationship to food, including sort of like direct nutrition stuff, which is not at all centered on the rules and do's and don'ts around what you're allowed to eat or not allowed to eat, because that's just not what we're about at all. But even the context of seeking pleasure and enjoyment and other elements that have a deep impact on our food choices and preferences. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more in other episodes. And, before we wrap up this conversation on shame resilience, I did want to offer one additional step that any listener could take today. And that is giving loving kindness meditation a try. I am the kind of person who understands all the great things about meditation. And once in a while, I will do it. And when I find something I love, I'm like, I'm so glad I did it. But I'll tell myself this I can't story. Like, I just can't relax. I just can't breathe. So if you're like me, please try giving loving kindness meditation a try. I think it is a beautiful meditation that helps build connection to yourself, to your inner caregiver. I really think that it helps you heal the wounds of your inner critic and the self-criticism so that you can kind of say things kinder and more gentle with yourself. But loving kindness can also help you feel more compassionate and connected toward others. And people in our lives can kind of get in the way of our self-care beliefs and values. values. And so what loving kindness meditation does is you do some deep breath work and you send well wishes, and it's kind of scripted and guided for you. So it's about warm and positive thoughts and feelings toward yourself, toward someone you care about, sort of like to all beings, to somebody who's suffering, who you know is suffering. And then usually the last one is like, and someone you're having difficulty with. And that's always like, no, I don't want to send them well wishes. But ultimately, when I get there, it's like, I actually feel better too. So it's a really great meditation. We have this in our group where I guide with a specific loving kindness meditation that's combined with a body scan, which is really powerful. But I have a link to the show notes where you can learn more about the foundations of loving kindness meditation. I have a whole body kindness episode dedicated to it. And so I want to make sure you have that as a resource and be willing to give that a try and see how that helps you.
Awesome. I love your loving kindness meditation too, that you've done in the program. So, it's all about setting, realistic expectations, right, for yourself, and sort of being kind, being compassionate, reminding yourself that it's okay. And, come join us in the group. Our next live call's coming up soon, and we're ready to help you on this path. You don't have to do it alone.
That's beautiful. It's true. You don't have to do it alone. Glennis, thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.